Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I go over the Testaments episode by episode. This episode will be over episode 4, Green Tea. If you haven't watched, I recommend going to watch and then coming back. Let's get into it. Before this episode, we got a teaser or preview of what's to come this season. And one of the things that happened at the end was we got June yelling in who I'm assuming to be Daisy's face, telling her basically the signature line that we've heard over and over again in this world. Do you understand me? This time June, I'm pretty sure she's telling it to Daisy. We don't get to see who she's saying to or saying this to, but we do or can assume that it is Daisy because of how the story is unfolding. Now, this brings me to something else that I keep seeing on the internet. I've already touched on this, and I keep still seeing people say that Daisy is going to be Nicole. And I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but it's getting kind of like, not annoying, but it's like, I don't understand how people still think Daisy is Nicole. Let's be real, okay? June has spent 6 seasons of The Handmaid's Tale trying to get Agnes out of Gilead, right? She got Nicole out of Gilead. Why in the world would June willingly put Daisy back into Gilead if Daisy was her daughter? That just makes no sense, right? Like, let's think about it from a logical perspective. Not only is the timeline the hugest thing, not only have the producers come out and said, like, this is, like, it won't work. But I mean, logically thinking, June would not send Daisy into Gilead if Daisy was Nicole. That just makes no sense. Now, I mean, once again, everybody's free to think what they want. So if you want to still believe that, that's totally up to you. But I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. But I guess, it doesn't have to make sense to me. But that's just my 2 cents on that. Okay, so now to the actual episode. This whole episode is basically playing into the theme of livestock, right? These girls are having this tea party to basically be shown off, as Daisy said, like prized pigs to the aunts, because you want to impress the aunts so that way you get placed with a good husband. If not, you could get placed with a husband in the colonies, which, of course, nobody wants to be in the colonies. So that's like the low of the low. Now, in the beginning of this episode, when they're getting ready for the party, we get Becca and Agnes in her room. And there's 2 things I want to point out here. One, they purposefully show us Agnes tying her, I don't know what you'd call it, but like her garments, I guess is the best way to put it. She was like tying that sucker tight. Like, she knows how to tie it because she's been trained how to tie it. So that's one thing, right, that we see. Then we see Becca, who has been, I guess, who's better at dancing. Apparently Agnes is not the best dancer. Kind of teaching Agnes how to dance. And it's in this moment that we see that Becca is possibly queer, right? Like, she's just giving that vibe. Like, she clearly is freaked out by what she's feeling when she's dancing with Agnes. And she quickly realizes, like, oh shit, like, I need to pull my hand back. Like, I need to put myself out of this situation because, as we know, in Gilead, you can get hung for being a gender traitor. And that is just not going to fly there. So I don't know where they will go with that story, because there's no way, unless we go like an Emily storyline, which I don't see happening, that we'd be able to see a lot of like that persisting more within this show. But I guess we'll just wait and see. I kind of think that's why she's a little detached from the marrying thing, but I really don't think like that has anything to do with it per se, because like I think she's just generally like, I don't want to marry this old dude, like, which totally makes sense, right? Like, none of these young girls should be having to marry these older men. So I think that's more of Becca's issue with the whole, turning green process and getting married than her being like, oh, I don't like men. So I don't think that like actually plays into this a lot, but that's just something to maybe like keep in the back of the mind too. Like, maybe that is another thing that's kind of pushing her. Like, this is like, not only is it already bad, but knowing that she's not into that only adds on to the stress of having to marry these older corrupt men, right? A big thing we see in this episode as well is Daisy really cracking. She starts to crack and she really sees that she's not as safe as she thought in Gilead, which how one thinks they're safe in Gilead, I'm not sure. But I guess maybe it's coming from the perspective of she thought she was more prepared and now she's realizing that she may not have a way out. And that really plays out throughout this whole episode. First being when she's in the flower shop and the other Mayday operative comes to her and tells her, hey, I need you to tell Garth he needs to get me out, right? And that freaks her out. Then they start walking from the flower shop and she once again sees all of these people being hung. We see her freak out again. We see her have this opposite reaction of all the other girls who once again have been in Gilead and are used to this. And Agnes once again tries to comfort her, like tells the other girl she's not used to it, like, blah, blah, blah. And we can just see that's adding on to Daisy's stress. She's like, oh shit, these are Mayday operatives, as Agnes told her. Like, and she really gets a picture of what these girls think about Mayday operatives, right? She already knew that Gilead in itself would not like Mayday operatives because they're trying to take them down. They are the revolution. But I think now that she's actually in there and getting deeper and deeper, these things are starting to click with her and she's really starting to freak out. One thing I wanted to point out too is the Pearl Girls have earrings, these little pearl earrings. And that is really significant because as we know, once again, this just plays back to like livestock, right? Like the handmaids, they had the red tags on their ears, right? And now the Pearl Girls have these pearl earrings. It's all about branding and like showing ownership or like just making them stand out in a way so that way they know that their place, right? And that is one thing that was very prevalent in this episode. We got to see the pearls on the Pearl's ears. I keep saying Pearl Girls, but they're actually pearls. Pearl Girls are the people who go get the pearls, and the pearls are the people they bring back. The ladies, the girls, the women. They bring back to Gilead. When we finally get to the party, we see how like stressful this is for these girls because their lives literally depend on it. Not if they live or die, but how their lives will be going forward. And you can see the pressure on everybody's faces. Everybody's just really trying to be perfect. Another thing I wanted to point out too, and I mentioned this last episode, but Daisy and Agnes kind of are starting to clash a little bit over Garth. We see Daisy seeing Agnes staring at Garth, and in her mind she says, I'm worried about being executed, and she's over there getting horny. And then further on in the episode, we also get to see Agnes confront Daisy about Garth. She's like, hey, you could get him killed, right? Because she obviously feels for him and doesn't want anything bad to happen to him. So I think that is part of it, but it's also she's just jealous. She doesn't want anybody else looking at Garth because she secretly wants to be with him. We are getting strong Nick and June vibes from Garth, but except it's not one person this time. It's not just Nick and June. It's like a love triangle of Garth, Agnes, and Daisy. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out because there's definitely going to be some like competitiveness and rivalry there, which kind of pulls in that aspect of typical teenage girls. Even though they're in Gilead, they still have those feelings and go through those phases. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. As we're going through the party and these girls are performing, pouring their tea, getting judged, we see Paula being a bee of course, as we already know she is, and she actually trips Miriam on purpose. And this poor girl is just freaking out because she knows that's it for her. And even when they're all in the kitchen after, she's like going to the aunt for comfort, and the aunt is like, yeah, sorry girl, like can't do nothing for you. You shouldn't have tripped. And it wasn't her fault. I felt so bad for her because she's probably for sure going to get sent to the colonies, or not to the colonies, but to be with a husband from the colonies. It is also here after we go through all that we see Agnes eating a cake, right? And we see them place this little porcelain bride, or at the time I didn't know it was porcelain, but yeah, it's a porcelain bride they place in the cake. It's almost like a king's cake, right? Except instead of getting good luck for finding the baby, you get married off to an old dude for finding the little porcelain bride. In this case, Agnes ends up getting it, which I'm convinced that somebody rigged that, and that somebody I'm thinking is Paula just like she helped trip Miriam. Because we saw Paula kind of looking at Miriam when she was kind of doing, I think, a better job, I guess, pouring the tea. So then that's why she felt like she had to trip Miriam. So I have a feeling that Paula definitely like did something to give Agnes the porcelain bride. But that was also a very bad omen, because then she chomps on that porcelain bride and of course cracks her tooth. Now I'll come back to the cracked tooth here in a second. I want to go back to the beginning a little bit, where Daisy, like I said, she's freaking out. She talks to Garth and she's like, hey, I need you to get me out of here. Like, I need to get out. Like, I've like shit's hitting the fan. Like, I don't want to be here. And Garth is basically like, well, you're not getting out until you can give us something useful. Which leads us to the point where we see Daisy sneaking around, going into Commander Mackenzie's office. And lo and behold, even though it doesn't look like anybody's in there, he's sitting in the corner smoking a cigarette or a cigar. She's very smart though, because she plays it off because she sees this thing of chocolates there and she, makes it seem like she wants these chocolates, which ends up actually working out in her favor. So, right, they're having this conversation. She's caught. She plays it off really well. And we also see Commander Mackenzie kind of caring for Agnes. Like, it seems like he's like almost worried about her because he knows what's about to happen. That was just interesting to see, because it seemed like he maybe didn't care as much about her, but that kind of seems like he does care. So I guess we'll get more of that dynamic going forward in the future. Maybe. We'll see. Okay, back to the chocolate. So the chocolate actually helps Daisy, because the back of the chocolate, we can see that chocolate is from Japan, which is weird because Japan has sanctions on Gilead. So what that means is that Japan has basically cut off ties or any trades with Gilead. So it's strange that Commander Mackenzie has these chocolates from Japan. So Daisy ends up giving that to Garth, and that, I'm thinking, is going to be like what she needs to help get her out, right? Because like we talked about earlier, Garth is like, bring us something interesting and then we'll try and get you out of here. So I think her oopsie and like quick thinking about the chocolate actually really helped her out, and that'll be her ticket, or some part of her ticket, to eventually get out. All right, now the next part of this, as we know, this episode gets really dark. Agnes, like I said a while ago, cracks her tooth on the porcelain bride, and she has to go back to the dentist. So trigger warning for SA. We can clearly see that Agnes is worried about going to the dentist because of what happened last time. And on a side note, I do feel bad for Becca, because I know what happens in the book. You can only assume what happened in the show if her dad is like that to these other girls, right? It's just a super sad situation. So they get to the dentist. She's clearly afraid, and it kind of seems like, Daisy has no clue what's going on, but Daisy's with her there. And so Daisy's sitting outside. As soon as we see Agnes in the dental chair and him putting that mask on her, my heart just dropped. It is so sad. Like, I was so scared for her, and you just knew it was going to happen. We didn't have to see it. It was already assumed based off of the way he acted before, and you just already know what type of man that is. And it was a very sad thing to, even think that could happen to her. And if that happens to her, like a super high up commander's daughter, can you imagine what he's doing to all these other girls? So Agnes is under anesthesia, so she doesn't really know what's going on. At the end of the episode, we see her getting undressed. And that's when we, as the audience, and she realizes that her perfectly tied garments are no longer tied. Or they are tied, but they're not tied correctly, right? And I think we just saw on her face, like, she realized what happened. I have hope that he will get caught. These girls are already having to go through all these other horrors, which granted they don't see as horrors really, because they've been there their whole life. I hope to see that within the show as it continues, he finally gets caught and receives the punishment he deserves, which is the wall, or maybe a stoning. Who knows what they'll do. Not only is Agnes going through all of this stuff, but Daisy at the end of the episode too has sort of a like, oh shit moment as well, right? Like, she goes to get the radio to put on the Mayday radio station, and she finds out that it is completely silent. Mayday has gone silent. So she was already panicking. Now this is just like the cherry on top. Like, she is freaking out, right? And she can't freak out like you normally would because she has to pretend and be quiet in this little bathroom stall. And I'm just really feeling for both of these girls right now because they are both in just such horrible places. And unless Agnes tells, right, she's going to have to play it off. And the same thing with Daisy. Like, she cannot visually freak out because she will get caught and get in trouble in Gilead. So within the next few episodes, we will see where that goes. I'm hoping things take a turn for the better for both of these girls, but we'll just have to wait and see. There are two things that I forgot to touch on that I'm going to circle back to really quick before I end the episode. One of those being Paula, once again being a bee, tells Agnes that she comes from weak genes, which I think is super ironic because the whole reason, as Agnes said before, that Paula is so important in this room of other women is because of who she's married to, right? If Paula wasn't married to Commander Mackenzie, she would be nothing unless she was married to another commander. But like, my point is like, that's the only reason she's important. So for her to say that to Agnes, which we already know how she is, so I wouldn't have thought of her to do anything other than what she did. But it's just like, girl, you're saying this to Agnes when you are no better, nor do you come from better. Just because you married somebody who is her dad, granted her adoptive dad, or her Gilead dad, however you want to put it, you're both in the same predicament, right? You are no better than Agnes. The second thing I wanted to touch on is the moment after where Daisy and Agnes are just alone, and Daisy's kind of trying to comfort her, make her laugh, and they kind of bond. They trauma bond. They kind of go over the commonalities, like, you know, Agnes's stepmom, and then her real mom, and then her bio mom. And then Daisy goes over her story about her, like, adoptive mom and then her bio mom. But one thing we find out, which I wanted to point out, is that Daisy says that her bio mom is dead. So as we know before, though, she did not know she was adopted until she met June. So I'm sure we're going to get this backstory soon, but my assumption is that the reason she knows her bio mom is dead is because when they're training her to go to Gilead, because that's what Mayday did, they trained Daisy to enter Gilead, which is why she's there and she's sort of prepared. This is where they told her about her backstory, and that's when we will learn who Daisy's parents actually were. So I have a feeling that will be coming soon. I did look to see if there are trailers for the next episode, and I was really surprised that there wasn't any trailers. I also noticed that they took off the teaser. I did not see the teaser that was there before, so I'm not sure why they took that off, or maybe it's just some sort of bug, but it is no longer on Hulu. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. I'm looking forward to covering the next episode next week, but in the meantime, if you want to head over to social media, I'm on YouTube, I am on Instagram, I am on TikTok. I post a lot more to TikTok, so if you want to go see me there, I do post daily pretty much, and I'm always active in the comments. So if you want to come spitball with me, talk about the show, I'm totally down for that. Just leave me a comment and I'll get back to you. Once again, these videos are on YouTube as well as on all of the podcast places. So if you like to listen, you can listen, or if you want to watch, you can watch as well. Either one is fine. I just thank you so much for supporting me and listening to me. I used to end these episodes with "Blessed be the fight." Maybe I'll go back to that. I don't remember if I did that last episode. But anyways, blessed be the fight.